Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the workshop. I appreciate having you here. Got an interesting little chat to have today. Interesting little discussion. I thought it was worth mentioning. So I got an email just last night from a previous client of mine. Now, if anyone here is just tuning into my channel, I'm a knife maker, leather worker, kind of general craftsman, but knife maker is where my game is. And I have produced quite a few blades, and I've dealt with a lot of awesome people who seek out my blades and really appreciate them, and that's just an awesome feeling. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you guys for that. But this previous client who I built a knife for back in my earlier days of knife making, he contacted me just last night, and he just received a custom blade from another maker, one that he was clearly excited to get. Now, I'm not going to mention the maker's name. I don't see the need in beating up on other makers or anything like that, but he was really unhappy with his purchase. When he got it in hand, I mean, the pictures looked great. I seen the website pictures and that. The knife looked awesome. When he got it in hand, he just was not pleased with the workmanship and what he received. And he contacted me, and I think this was a smart thing to do. I think he kind of recognized maybe some of his potential bias and wanted to be sure that he was being just in his criticisms. So, and he did have a lot of criticisms of the blade, so he wanted me to take a look at it and pass my opinion on if these are acceptable flaws or not. And that is sort of the topic of today's video, is acceptable flaw, acceptable tolerances within hand craftsmanship and the work that you're getting, particularly, of course, my realm, knife making, leatherwork, things like that. What is acceptable? Now, as I mentioned to him, the first thing you got to consider is how much money you're paying for the knife. So I went and looked up the knife, and he paid a fair little bit of money for this knife. Not quite as much as something I would have built. If I had to build the same thing, I would have charged more for it. But still, it wasn't a $50 Canadian Tire purchase or $50 eBay purchase or something like that. The guy paid for a custom knife, and the work was not up to par, in my opinion, for what he paid. So the first thing you have to consider is price. How much did you pay? If you're going to order a custom, I've seen customs on eBay for $30 and $40 for Damascus billet blades with fancy handles and liners and stuff. If you're paying $40 for a knife like that, you get what you pay for. So if you're carving softwood and your edge is rolling, that's what you paid for. If your handle delaminates and falls off, sorry, you paid for it. That's just how it is. You can't get quality handmade stuff with premium materials for that kind of price. It just doesn't happen. It costs far more than that to make it, let alone the time invested and the experience of the craftsman. So price is to be considered. Now, I'm currently working on a gorgeous batch of blades here, everything from saber grinds to Scandies, really small knives to bigger full-size hunting knives. Here I have a unique bullnose configuration. Now, my opinion, because I've kind of crossed over a few different fields of craftsmanship, in any type of craftsmanship, the craftsman has to kind of set his standard. What is acceptable? I guess this knife he sent out to this customer was acceptable by his standards. I would have not let it leave my shop. The guy, I addressed each of his concerns and critiques with the blade. For example, his blade had a very mild amount of warp. Now, he was concerned about that. In my opinion, it is very difficult to get a blade that is absolutely perfectly straight. Unless you have a very, very expensive and accurate heat treat setup, it is hard to keep that blade, I mean, just perfectly, like gun barrel straight. It's difficult to do that. A couple of these blades right here have the mildest amount. Once the handle gets on there, you won't see it, but I can detect. It's not this one. One of these yellow fox patterns here have the mildest amount of warp. Will not affect function, will not draw the eye, will not be an issue. That is an acceptable tolerance, in my opinion. His knife was borderline. I'd have to think hard. Now, I did heat treat 3 yellow foxes in my last batch at the last shop, my very final batch in the old shop, and 3 or 4 of them warped, huge warps. I threw them in the garbage. Actually, they may be here. One or two of them may be here somewhere now. But they would have been completely functional, but it was enough work. It bothered my eye, and I do not want that name. I do not want my name, my craftsmanship, going out into the world like that. It's just not an acceptable standard. Now, things like receiving a knife with a very poor quality edge, just not sharp, that's something that is completely unacceptable. It is a designated cutting tool. It's what it's supposed to do. It should roll off your line completely sharp. Now again, what is an acceptable tolerance there? Because when you have, you buy a $300, $500 ZT, a zero tolerance knife, comes from the factory. You take a good look at that primary edge. Of course, they're mostly like saber or hollow grind. You take a good look. It's a coarse grit. It's probably a 220 belt grind grit. It's put on there quick and dirty. It may be buffed. It's probably not. So it's sharp. It'll probably pop hairs, no problem. It'll do any EDC task. But it's not up to your 6,000 grit and strapped level. Is that acceptable? I think it is, because of the time it takes. If you need every knife to be hand sharpened on whetstone like that, your price just went up big time. So that just becomes kind of an accepted practice within the knife community. All of my original knives, fixed blades that used to go out, used to be hand sharpened on whetstones, but it slowed production so much. People were waiting too long for their knives. I was getting myself into more trouble by it, working with carbon steel on the whetstones all the time, and water sitting around, water spots and little surface rust spots and things like that. Now I just finished buffing the bevels on this yellow fox pattern. Okay, this is one you see me stamp in a recent video. Now I made the decision when I started knife making to freehand grind all my bevels. I don't use any jigs, nothing like that. This was put on by me holding like this against the belt and grinding in that bevel. Now, if you put a micrometer or something like that on one of these, a caliper on these, there are inconsistencies. And I've struggled with different types of bevels on getting them perfect. Some are tougher than others. The Scandi I've really done good on recently. I've picked up my game. It is not easy to freehand grind, and a person is not a machine. You're not going to get perfect results every time. I do have a standard set where if I cannot get the grind close enough, I have to start from scratch. That's the name of the game. Now, the Eccentric Craftsman, one of my favorite channels on YouTube, talks a lot about acceptable tolerances. Now, he's within like carpentry. He's a general contractor, a home builder, and he talks a lot about what is accepted. And there are a lot of things within house carpentry that vary a lot. The tolerance you have when you're framing up trusses versus walls versus floor joists versus foundations versus fine carpentry and cabinetry, they're totally different. And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is each craftsman needs to understand what is acceptable tolerance in their field. And I guess for each individual craftsman, they have to understand what their time and work is valued at. I would encourage any of you that gets a knife, whether it's from me or any other custom maker or from a production run knife, have a good long think about what might be acceptable. For example, getting a folder. I've seen people really complaining about like some of the case knives, for example, receiving their folder and the blade is ever so off center, and that is maddening to them that they paid $120 for this gorgeous piece of craftsmanship that is largely handmade. They've been assembled by people, they've been grinded and sharpened and tension pivots by people who make hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these knives. The production is so fast that their blade is slightly off center. It just grinds their gears, and to me that is an outrageous level of tolerance. That's silly, in my opinion. If that doesn't suit you, if you can't handle that, then probably seek out a different maker. But for that price range and what you're getting, I feel like those are silly gripes. Those are unreasonable standards. Now, as my warranty certificate states, sometimes things slipped past, mistakes happen, things happen in shipping. I had a knife returned to me right around Christmas time that I shipped out, and it was real nice, a gorgeous knife. when it left here. By the time it reached the customer and sat in a different climate for a week, the handle totally shrunk. It was unstabilized wood. As the client asked for it, the handle shrunk way down beneath the tang. Of course they were unhappy with this. I would be unhappy with that if that happened to one of my precious blades that I paid good money for, because my knives do sell at a premium. And if I received a knife from myself like that and that happened, I would be upset. And they done the right thing. They contacted me and sent me a picture. I said 100%, send it back, I want to correct it. And I repaired that handle, we corrected it and sent it back. Everything's all great, but just make sure, I guess what I'm trying to say here is for the craftsmen, for the makers, make sure you're putting out good quality work. And for the clients, don't accept trashy work, but have reasonable expectations. Sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes things happen with workmanship. Things pass. Sometimes there's a little nick in a blade that gets sent out that you didn't notice. Me as the maker, I have 5, 6, 7 knives here on the bench. I sharpen them all. They're passing along. I have a nice look over them before they go. And I miss a little nick in the blade. That type of thing happens. So have reasonable expectations and tolerances. Consider the amount of money you pay. That definitely changes things. And craftsmen, do your best to put out good quality work. Trying to get better every single day. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for supporting my channel and my work. If you're looking to purchase something, check out Noseworthy.com or email me for a custom knife order. Email down below there now. One last thing, if you could go ahead down in the description, tell me what you think when receiving a custom knife. Let's pick a price range. Let's say right around the $200 Canadian, maybe 180 USD mark or something like that. What do you think is acceptable in terms of flaws? What's acceptable? Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next video.